All right. So if you have your phone nearby you and you find yourself, if you care to, you don't have to. I'm going to be monitoring the comments. So you don't have to. Um, we'll be live. Okay. Yep. We're
And
live.
you have a link for
You
the
find yourself,
YouTube?
if you care to, you don't have to. I'm going to be monitoring. Hang on one second. Okay. Say that again, Candace.
Oh, I was just asking, when you were talking about monitoring the messages, is there like a link for the YouTube?
Yeah. Let me send it to you now. So welcome everyone who is live with us. Lumina, welcome. Great to have you here. Uh, Candace, I will text you this link. Would you prefer text or email?
Text is great.
Okay, cool. So welcome everyone who's joining. I am joined this evening by a wonderful astrologer, completely gifted psychic medium, and incredible um, death doula, death midwife, Candace Marie Loft. She is, I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about her momentarily. Let me just give her the link to our YouTube. There we go. She is joining us live to talk about the great triple conjunction of 2020. This is an energy that astrologers have been talking about for years. Astrological aspects like the ones we are about to encounter in 2020 have not been seen in many years. And these astrological aspects have predated some of the most significant events in world history. And we are about to see those astrological aspects become available again or happen again. So I've invited one of the most talented, gifted astrologers that I know, who actually I consider an astrology mentor and teacher. She's read for me many times, to come and talk about these aspects and what they include, and what we can expect as we start the new decade. But before we jump into that, I just want to share a little bit about Candace. You can find her website here at beyondtheveiltarot.com. And you'll see here that she is an astrologer. She does do tarot, and she combines them into one reading. She is also clairvoyant. She specializes in working with people who are making the transition between life and the afterlife, helping them to do that in a way that creates unification of their soul and moves them forward on their timeline. You can learn more about her here under About Candace Marie. And if you would like to book a reading with her, just click on Book a Reading and you'll see the different types of sessions that she offers. So I cannot recommend her services highly enough. She is absolutely hands down one of my favorite astrologers. For those of you who are more familiar with working with me from a twin flame perspective, you definitely know that I read the stars from that kind of location or with that orientation. Candace can go there, but she also has a much broader view of what's going on in your chart. And so working with her will give you not only clear sight into what's coming up for you in 2020, but it'll also clarify why certain things have gone the way they have in the before, and what it is you need to understand about the lessons you're being invited to learn now. So that being said, I'm going to stop sharing here and I am going to let Candace illuminate us on the incredible energies of 2020. How's that for an intro? Did I do all right?
Perfect. That was quite a mouthful.
Well, feel free to go ahead and share your screen, Candace. Thank you for being here.
All right. So I'll go ahead and just get started. Let me pull this up here. And let's share. Those of you guys who are familiar with looking at charts, this is just, I'm just going to leave this on the screen. Nothing too crazy is going to happen quite yet. I just want to talk a little bit about kind of what we're coming into. So basically, you know, like you kind of talked about a little bit already, we're having some transits that are going to be going on that quite a bit of the astrological community, I feel like, has been talking about really for the better part of the last 2 years. This is Saturn coming into a conjunction, which Saturn has been in Capricorn since about Christmas of 2017. This is the ruling planet and for this sign, so I feel like it's had a little bit of an extra oomph to it. And we've had Pluto in Capricorn for quite a while now, the better part of really like the last 10 years. And then what we have that's coming together is both Saturn and Pluto are going to be in a conjunction exactly, which happens every about 34 to 38 years. So like the last super conjunction that we had was actually in the early 80s when we had Saturn and Pluto come together in Libra. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Then we also had in the late 60s, we had a Pluto Uranus conjunction that was in Virgo. So these outer planets, they move very slowly. You know, for those of you guys who have been studying astrology and kind of learning more about how the sun goes through each of the 29 degrees and how that makes up each, month. And then we go into another 29 steps each month of each different sign. The moon moves pretty quickly every 2 to 3 days. It changes signs. You know, closer planets also, like the ones that we feel when they retrograde, right? Like Mars and Venus and Mercury. But the outer planets, like Uranus, like Pluto, like Saturn, like Neptune, from a generational standpoint, when these planets come together, they create slow, kind of really alchemy-like transitions and transformations in the world. And the micro very much is the macro. So a lot of the things that are taking place, to some extent, astrologers have we've seen this coming for several years. We really started talking about it quite a bit in 2017, right when, Saturn was going into Capricorn. So in January, we're going to be having this super conjunction around the 12th. To be honest with you, and I've been telling people, and I've seen this with my clients, I've certainly seen this in my life, we have been feeling this slow kind of just getting worked this whole past year. Because when we go back in time, planets, they do this thing where they move forward, their forward motion, they stop, they slow down, they retrograde. It looks like from Earth's, axis that it's going backwards, but really it's just the way that the Earth is moving and the slowness of that planet, it appears to be going backwards. But a retrograde is when something's not working at full capacity, right? So we see like Mercury retrogrades, we have the phones have issues, or fax machines break down, or we have travel delays and things like that. But what we're seeing now is that in January, and right now, all the planets are moving forward, but in January, Saturn, which is the taskmaster, the lord of karma, this is the planet that has to do with really making sure over a 2.5-year period, we're really learning something and we're learning it well. So this last year, Saturn got all the way up to, I want to say about 19 degrees. Let's go back in time. Right about 19 degrees. So you can see, so early in the year, as of January, here's Saturn, 13 degrees. And then it moves, sorry, the dial's going to spin a little bit, but it moves all the way up to right around 19. And so it got really close to Pluto. So in a way, it's like, I work with about 2 to 4 degree orb. So we see 19 to 22. We were feeling it in March. So for those of you guys who are trying to kind of be like, well, what's going to happen for me? I will give you a checklist of all of the things you want to look at in your astrology to just be mindful of, and some of the people who might get hit a little bit harder by this, but it's inevitable. Everybody is going to go through some major transition as a result of it. But we were in this in March. We were feeling the conjunction. And it got up to 20 degrees. And then it stopped, it slowed down, and then it went retrograde. So really that March through, I want to say about June period seems rather significant to me. Saturn conjunct Pluto being about transformation. Usually this is a planet that rules Scorpio. So, death, sex, transformation, rebirth, taxes, but certainly obsession comes with Pluto. Alchemy comes with Pluto, the occult, secrets, sexual secrets, sexual preferences, things that have to do with growth on a soul level. So in my opinion, Saturn and Pluto, these are the badasses of astrology. These are, when we see these two planets come together, there's some major shifts that are going on out in the world. And those of you guys who were born with a conjunction like this, like Saturn and Pluto conjunct, or perhaps maybe those of you guys who have them in aspect to each other, certainly you see that power struggle to some extent kind of take place in your life, depending on where it falls in your chart. So then when we move forward in 2019, these began to separate and they began to kind of split a little bit. And, Saturn went retrograde. And what it does when it goes retrograde is it says, okay, the first real 5 or 6 months of the year, we're working on a situation. We're trying to get you to release and let go of really ultimately what's like a death grip. That's my interpretation of this. And now it's been coming back. So now Saturn has woken up, woke up recently, about a month, I want to say ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And so here we're ready to join Pluto. And right now even is a really pivotal time, because right now we've got, Saturn that's now worked its way back up to 19 degrees, and it's going to be hovering in the next 2 days with Pluto and with Venus. And we have this full moon tomorrow in Gemini. And so one thing I wrote about with this full moon is like, this is the last stop. This is it. This month, this next lunar cycle, especially those of you guys who are really into like the twin flame stuff, the relationship stuff, the trying to get a read on that energetically, or trying to get a read on where that is going and what that path is, and whether or not it's time to stay with it, or whether it's time to just cut that energy loose and let it come to you if it's that right match, however it is that you feel in terms of that journey. This yesterday, today, tomorrow 72-hour period is very interesting, because I find that when Pluto links up with Venus, we have very strong passions, right? We become very fixated on the sexual aspect of it, the do I have that connection? Is it there? Is it vital? Is it going to move forward? We also see lots of stuff that comes up with money and finances and the banking systems, certainly whenever anything is in Capricorn. So I've kind of been watching and seeing what's been going on financially and economically. In this period, they had a Fed meeting today and some other things that are going on. And now we're coming into the holidays. So you're going to hear a lot of stuff that's going to come up about money and banking. You're going to hear a lot of people talking about, how much money they're spending and how much money they're putting on credit, because certainly Pluto can have to do with debt. So that's the more kind of like physical way that this can manifest. But I believe that December, this month, is the last stop. This is it. Anything that people have been really struggling with, the last year, I kind of feel like the universe gave us the first 6 months of being like, all right, cool. I'm going to show you with the Saturn and the Pluto and the South Node conjunction, South Node being released. We're going to show you what's not working and what's broken down. South Node and Capricorn is like what's too heavy, what's too serious, what's too much work, what's too rigorous, what's outdated. Because Capricorn can be about, legacy or what we do, or what kind of like family patternings we take on. It's almost like, what's expected of you out in the world. 10th house stuff, Capricorn. So the opposite on that, the flip side, is the North Node in Cancer. So, North Node in Cancer is like the hugs and the kisses and the family and home and the fuzzy sweaters and baking the cookies. And it's very much the opposite of Capricorn, where it's like focusing on the home base. So in some weird way, we've even seen this, out in the world. Yes, there's been a lot of like political drama playing out on the world stage, and there's been a lot of tension with our relationships to people in other countries. And there's also been a lot of tension with big business. And you would think in some strange way that would almost like create almost like a year of just being bogged down. And certainly some people have told me they felt this way, but the North Node is really saying, let's get back to the home base. Like, let's get back to, instead of just working our lives away, like prioritizing and creating space for our family, I don't know about you, but it's like I've seen an ungodly amount of people in this last year like get married, which I think is kind of cool. I've seen a lot of people suddenly be like, I'm gonna have a kid, I'm gonna have a baby. So we are seeing the North Node kind of manifesting in a way where it's saying like, don't let life get so kind of heavy or work get so kind of heavy or monotonous that we're not making time to reconnect to our home base. So that's the silver lining here. And then recently, I don't know about you guys, but the retrograde that we just recently had in Scorpio was a bit of a doozy, especially people who have natal placements in Scorpio, whether it's your own Venus or your Pluto or your rising or your sun or your moon. It was crazy. That Halloween to about, a couple days ago, once we came out of the shadow, was a period of looking at anything and everything that was like, okay, cool, this is really not working. Scorpio is about death and transition and transformation and having to learn to let go. I, in my life, saw it play out pretty significantly. And I have to say, I think October, November was probably the most transformational thus far with my clients, especially those in like relationships and stuff, where it was like if there was power struggles, if there was secrets, if people were not being vulnerable, if people were not showing up and doing their due diligence in their relationships and not dealing with their own fears and their own intimacy issues, then it was like people were just kind of splitting left and right. And then something weird has happened recently in the last like week. I've seen a lot of people get back together after having this brief period of time apart where, time to reflect on, there's a reason why I think that I'm not really open and vulnerable with my emotions. It goes back to, my relationship with my father or my grandmother, or, I was picked on when I was a kid. So people are really digging, because Scorpio is about digging. It's about doing psychic surgery and kind of getting to the core issues of, what we don't like. I think that once we get into January, though, because we've got an eclipse happening, both Christmas, really late Christmas evening, early on the 26th, there's going to be an eclipse. And then we're going to have an eclipse that's also going to be coming in, and that's going to be taking place in January. I'm trying to get my dates here. Give me just a second. But that eclipse that's coming in on January, I want to say it's around the 15th, I think. I don't have it. That's also going to be in Cancer. So we've got one that's going to be in Capricorn. I'll actually go ahead and pull that up really quick. And that's going to be on, like I said, the 25th, 26th. We've got first the eclipse that's going to be in Capricorn. And that actually, I think that that's going to make a really great Christmas.
The other one is January 10th.
January 10th. So we've got this one that's happening. The sun and the moon are going to be in Capricorn, so that's a new moon. It's just a lot of like, in, out with the old, in with the new. This conjunction of, sun, Jupiter, South Node, moon, Saturn, Pluto. I think you're going to see a lot of people like Christmas Day might very well be the time where people have some like major realizations that's like, okay, like this is where I want to go in 2020. Like those of you guys who are having a really hard time, like letting go of that relationship or letting go of that person or of that job or of that career or of that habit or that pattern. I think setting your New Year's intentions early would probably be best, because doing this in January, when then the energies are already pushing you, like I don't feel like a lot of people are going to have a lot of a choice of whether or not they're going to be able to hold on to certain things in January. It's just going to be like, that's the cutoff time. So it's a really strong time for manifesting on Christmas and the day after Christmas. Certainly setting intentions and waiting until right actually after the eclipse, because I personally observed eclipses as times where, we want to be kind of in awe of that energy. We want to take it in. We want to be quiet. We want to be still. We want to be praying. We want to be, doing our mantras, being in ritual. We don't want to be moving around too much. An eclipse is like a new moon or a full moon on steroids. And this particular energy right after Christmas is going to be something that's going to give you an idea of what's going to happen in January. And I feel like many people are making a decision right around, Christmas that's like, this is where my life is going. And let me tell you, I don't say this lightly. People will be making decisions in their lives that I believe will be impacting them for the better part of the next 12 to 30 years, depending on which cycle we look at. Because Jupiter has come back into Capricorn, which some people say, usually Jupiter is happier in Sag. We've had a year of optimism and expansion and travel, but this year, Jupiter coming into Capricorn, people are like, oh, it's in detriment, da 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 da. Which, okay, by traditional astrology, so that's true. But when we see Jupiter, which is the expander, Saturn, which is the retraction and the stability, and Pluto is the transformation, I kind of welcome Jupiter to this party because he makes anything bigger. So it's like we don't have the opportunity to continue to hold on to things that might be very Pluto, like they may be toxic, they may not be healthy, they may be psychologically damaging. It may be work schedules or careers or, working for bosses that don't necessarily facilitate us being able to have enough time for our family or enough time for our emotional well-being or for any of these things. It's like I can see in this next year that many people are going to make changes to their lifestyles, to their work schedules, to the way that they work, how they work, the way that we look at work, and what is just too much work, right? Because sometimes, a relationship can be too much work. And if we're living in the North Node and if we're doing our North Node business, we are falling into situations where we are loving unconditionally, we are nurturing, we're building home, we're setting, we're putting down roots, we are setting the intentions to also release trauma. I see the South Node, Saturn, Pluto is like many people are choosing to do a lot of DNA activation work, or they're doing a lot of ancestral work, or they're doing like a lot of like past life regression work or hypnosis, or soul retrieval work, things that are really working on a Pluto level, and also working on a Jupiter level, where we're introducing shamanic practices and techniques and various spiritual techniques to be able to go in and say, okay, we're going to do the work. We're going to clear out some of these ancestral patternings. If you come from a lineage of ancestral trauma, whether it's like mother to daughter or father to son, or generations of having issues with abuse or neglect or divorce, some of these things have become so ingrained in us that it's just, unfortunately, we keep telling ourselves the same story, and ultimately we end up living that story. So I'm seeing a lot of clients that are like, I'm 30 years old, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50 years old, and I've never been married, or I really want to be able to practice intimacy and show up and be able to be available, for a partner, for, your beloved, but I don't know how, and I'm scared, and I haven't dealt with these certain situations. And I'm like, okay, well, you're right on time. So there's a lot of power here, I think, in this next 2-month period, to just be really raw and honest with ourselves about what is and what is not working.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing this. As this is exactly why I invited you, because I was like, there's no one who has a better read on this energy, and an ability to break it down in the way it will manifest in our day-to-day lives like you.
Yep.
So if you're watching this and you're really digging Candace's energy, you'll find the link to her website below the video in the description box, and you'll be able to book a reading. She's booking out in January at this point, but it is so worth the wait. All right, girl. So you talked to us about how this is going to break down in our personal lives. This Capricorn Cancer eclipse cycle has been ongoing for about a year and some change at this
Yep.
point. Talk to us about that eclipse cycle and about how you see that moving forward as Jupiter starts having conversations with Saturn and Pluto.
Well, I think, we are going to be still in the eclipse cycle until mid next year. So we are going to be kind of changing in a way, because we are going to have some that are going to come in, and those are going to be happening then in Gemini and Sagittarius. but we still have some eclipses that are going to be popping up mid next year in like the June, July time. I think that, Saturn is supposed to be hovering. Let me stop sharing this. Give me 1 second. I'll pull up my notes. Saturn's going to be, kind of coming and going and making its conjunctions to Pluto several times. So we will see it several different times. It's not going to be like, okay, it happens once and then that was the wave and okay, we're good to go. Mm-mm. The first conjunction that's going to be happening, is, like I said, is on January 12th, and that will include Saturn and Pluto. Mercury, the Sun, Ceres, they're all going to be hovering around there too. Then the second conjunction that's worthy of mentioning will be April 5th of 2020. That's when Jupiter and Pluto conjunct at around 24 degrees of Capricorn. Then on the 21st of 2020, June 21st, we have a solar eclipse that's going to be in Cancer. And it's got a loose kind of like Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction, kind of, but it's going to sextile other planets. So it's going to make some things happen. And then we're going to see that the final conjunction between Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn will be happening on November 13th of 2020. Now, then what we're going to see at two different times next year, Saturn will actually move out of Capricorn and it'll go into Aquarius very briefly. It'll spend a very brief time in Aquarius. I believe that's in like the March going into April time. And then finally, Saturn's going to go into Aquarius, ironically with Jupiter, and that's going to be December 21st of 2020. So my interpretation is that pretty much between the cardinal squares with the sun, we've also got a Mars retrograde next year that's going to be in Aries. Every 3 months, we're going to get checked. It's not going to be something where, okay, everything's going to be fine. We're good for 6 months. I don't think it's going to work like that, because I really see this push with Jupiter and Saturn, because, Saturn, that it was one of the original rulers of Aquarius. So Saturn does very well in Aquarius, actually. I think with Jupiter going there too, I see this like 2021. This is the birth of a new age. This is the birth of working together. This is going to be changes in environmental structures. This is going to be a lot of communal living. I think it's going to be probably like the second coming of like the 60s. I know that sounds kind of silly, but there's always, whenever we have major life and soul transformations and major political and world events, we have a renaissance, right? We have amazing music and movies and art and social movements and environmental movements and all kinds of things that come about because of that tense energy. So yes, we'll have the tension next year, but I think that what will be birthed of that is a lot more togetherness, basically, and doing what's best for everyone, and focusing on community and focusing on friendships. So there is a method to the madness. I keep telling everybody, Saturn and Pluto, at least in my opinion, but I'm very Plutonian, but Saturn and Pluto, when they come together, it's basically to create deep, eternal, internal soul changes. So everybody is really, I've been encouraging all of my clients, and anytime I do any kind of like media or anything like this, I've been encouraging people, go and look at your natal chart. Go and look where Saturn and Pluto is in your natal chart. If you don't know how to figure that out, or if you don't have one, you can go onto astro.com. It's free. You can plug in, the time, city, and date which you were born, and it'll give you a graph. And you want to go and see where on that circular graph Capricorn is. So each house is going to have a different meaning. So it's going to be different for certain people. I've been working, I think some of my most significant clients that I've seen thus far have been probably people who are from the early 80s. I've seen a lot of people from the early 80s because they've got like a Saturn Pluto conjunction in Libra. So, these squares are really pushing them to open up again when it comes to relationships and learning how to evolve past having had past trauma in relationships. I'm working with a lot of people who are also born, even, from the early 80s, really through the mid 80s. And then I've got a whole slew of people who were born in the early 90s who have a lot of planets natally in Capricorn, and they're going through their Saturn's return right now. So it's like, that's the Saturn return from hell, at least in my opinion. And I'm working with a lot of people who are born also in the mid 70s, who also have a lot of, like Uranus and Scorpio that's making aspects to planets in Capricorn. So they're having to evolve sexually and in terms of their finances and their money. So it's like, it's really, there's no way it's not going to hit pretty much everyone. I think some of the people who are making out the best from these transits are those who were born in the mid to late 60s, because people born in the mid to late 60s, they have these conjunctions, but they're in Virgo. So they've got either like Uranus and Saturn, or Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. So it's making positive aspects we call trines, basically, to all these planets in Capricorn. And if obviously there's a lot of content that's, I mean, I could go on and on about this for hours. There's a lot of content online, both in a sense of, predicting what's going to be kind of happening and what's going to be moving forward for some of us on a world scale. I kind of am trying to divide and conquer, and I do definitely talk about this, but I try to work with clients one-on-one, because the more that I can kind of help people in their day-to-day learn how to navigate these challenging energies, the better they're going to go out into the world, and they're going to do the same thing with other people. And we're all connected. It's going to affect other people equally. I think that if you have any planets that are between, 22 and 25 degrees of a cardinal sign, so that would be Libra, Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, that's going to get hit too. So it's not just you have to be born in a certain year. If you look at your specific degrees, like let's say, like, some of you guys might have a moon in a cardinal sign, or you might be a Cancer rising. I think Cancer risings are the people I'm seeing who are really just chugging along. The Cancer rising people are having to learn how to facilitate healthier relationships. I'm seeing a lot of Libra risings that are having to pick up and move home, or make major changes in their home, or maybe they're going through deaths and transformations and endings of relationships. I've certainly been seeing a lot of Aries going through a lot of career changes, and how they're navigating and kind of expressing themselves out in the world, and taking responsibility for their own life.
Hey, Candace, I think we lost sound, honey. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, let me see if I can get sound with Candace back. Okay, lovies, hang tight. We're going to get Candace back here. Give me 1 second. Here she comes. Yay! All right.
I don't even remember what I was saying, but basically, look, if you get a chance to look at your chart, look for these angles. If you fall into one of these cardinal placements, sun, moon, rising, definitely important to take a look out. But if you're somebody who's a Virgo or a Taurus or a Capricorn, not saying you're not going to go through changes, you are, especially the Capricorn people, but that's actually empowering you. So that's that. And there's a lot of people who will talk about, you know, the history of some of this stuff. I mean, the transits that we're having right now date back to the 1500s.
So
That was,
can you give us some of that? Like that, I know we have limited time left, but I'm really curious. You can go either place you want to go. I know you have the chart of the United States. I'm super curious to know what you see for where this falls, or you can go into the history stuff, whichever you feel led to do first.
so okay, so for the Americas chart, from
Be
what I,
sure to share screen.
oh yeah, let me pull this up. Let me grab that. And okay, so let's see. Here we go. Charts. America's birth chart. There we go. Pull this up. Share. Okay. You guys can see this, I hope. Yeah. All right.
Yep, we can see it.
Cool. So if you look, I mean, the outer wheel is what's moving currently, but Saturn has now moved into America's second house. Okay. So second house being money, values, material assets, things that are of value. So if this were like a natal chart, and I see Saturn going in the second house, I start talking to a client about really focusing on sticking to a budget, having a budget, learning to be okay, doing with a little bit less, prioritizing, getting things maybe paid off in a timely manner rather than, hoarding things and buying a bunch of stuff. And I guess talk to them about just being a little bit more frugal, and that this may be a period of kind of having to tighten the belt financially. And then usually when Saturn leaves this house, things kind of ease up a little bit and it gets a little bit easier. But Saturn has just recently moved back into the second house. Now, America's getting ready to come up on having also something that's called its Pluto's return. So that's about every 270 odd to 300 years. So obviously, us as humans, we don't live that long. So we do not have a Pluto return. But this is going to be similar transits to when America was founded. So when we think about, the mid 1770s and how America came to be, and that really it was like us, leaving Britain and having to fight our way out, and us also choosing to move away from a political kind of structure of having, a king or having a queen, and being free and having, a democracy and being able to vote and have that freedom of making our own decisions. A lot of this is going to come back, especially considering, this particular degree 27 is connected to pretty much everything that has to do with Gemini. It's documents, papers, contracts, agreements, things that have to do also with intellectual rights. A lot of the things that you're hearing about basically in the news right now. So
The Constitution?
Constitution, bingo, is what I was going to say. Is, we have come into uncharted territory right now in America, both financially in terms of our debt, and our budget, but also we are going through certain things legally where we do not have laws written to handle these situations. So when we think about the Constitution being drafted as kind of like this outline to be able to ensure that our government is functioning, morally and ethically, and creating a structure that is safe and sound, I think this is going to be tested. I think that the Pluto return doesn't start for a couple of years, but Saturn and Pluto getting ready to conjunct with Jupiter right around here, that's going to be very colorful. And that, like I said, is going to be pretty much starting right around mid-January. So just having all of these together, expect to hear a lot about America's budget. And if you remember what happened in the beginning of 2019, where we had all of the, federal workers that pretty much were laid off for a month, that's Saturn in Capricorn. Walls, putting up walls, breaking down walls. I mean, this whole debate about, putting up a wall between here and Mexico. But if you go back 30 years ago, the last time we had the Saturn conjunctions with Neptune and Uranus in the late 80s, early 90s, the Berlin Wall came down. So borders are always a big thing. So I assume that that might kind of pop up a little bit. And then, the March, April time, when then we have Mars join the bunch. I think the first 3 months are just going to be very colorful. And we're going to hear a lot about the fact that we can no longer continue to just go into the negative digits financially as a country. I think that there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to also come up that has to do with managing debt, whether it's student loans or, right now we have really low interest rates. I'm not really predicting that next year. I don't think that's going to be the case. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying to be optimistic, but that's certainly going to get colorful. And Pluto is going to get closer and closer throughout this next year. And Saturn will finally leave at the end of the year. So that will be nice to have Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in Aquarius. I'm kind of thinking what may end up happening when this conjunction happens, because it's building into a trine with the midheaven, is that whatever has kind of rocked the boat or gone south in 2020 financially, we're developing new structures. And then we're going to figure out, okay, well, what's best for everybody and how can we kind of start building this out in a much easier or better way. I didn't really touch it, but Pluto, Pluto aspects, oftentimes we see a lot of stuff connected to war. So there's some talk about people saying, well, there could be war. I don't necessarily think it would be war in the sense that, people would necessarily think that it is. But it may be, war going on within the government and a new, parties stepping down. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but new parties being developed, new branches of government being developed. It's going to be really interesting to see, how this is going to play out. We look at more than just these transits. Obviously, I like to look at the solar return chart for America and some other things, but it's gonna be interesting to see what's happening as we have even Jupiter now making an opposition, or building into what's going to be an opposition with our Venus, our natal Jupiter, our Sun. This is, I think, indicating, legal challenges, but also not necessarily in the best relations with other countries. And I think that we're going to see that this is creating a little bit of division and separating ourselves from other countries.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in the works as Saturn transited the first house. The America really started to quote unquote stand alone.
Yep. And I think that, it's, and like I said, the micro macro is, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Where we want to get to kind of a point where, whether it's politically or just even in our personal lives or how we relate to other people, it's choosing not to be divided, right? It's okay to have opinions, but it's also important to practice, mediation and respect and being able to find this middle ground so we can find solutions for some of the things that are going on. So Pluto will drive us to a point where you see the intensity and the extremism on both sides. It's not just politically, I mean, you name it, it doesn't matter what it is, but you'll see a lot of division in this next year. And that's to kind of show people that division's not really getting us anywhere.
So, in the greater astrological community, I'm just curious what you hear about these configurations, both world stage and for the United States. This will be my last question because I know you've got to go. What are you hearing at the most optimistic about these transits and what they will mean initially and long term? And what are you hearing at the most pessimistic and what they'll mean initially and long term?
Optimistic is going to be brand new foundations that arise from some really shitty ones, to be honest with you. It's whatever falls apart. And I do think that, I guess worst case scenario would be, war or a change in world power, which we're kind of starting to see in a way. And I think that America is still trying to stay on top of that, but we're seeing that kind of rattle. Um, Worst case scenario, plague. We saw that when this happened several hundred years ago, we had the dancing plague that happened in France. Pluto is always associated with illness. And so my biggest concern has been Capricorn being the government and Pluto being, illnesses or cancer or radiation. It's some of this stuff that they're putting up with, like the new 5G networks. We don't know how that radiation is affecting people. If it's affecting people, that concerns me because there may be something to that. It's the damage that's gone on in the ozone layer and how we're actually getting more so affected by, the radiation from the sun or from direct sunlight than what we're aware of. It can be that there are outbreaks of people getting very sick. It can be that there is some correlation or connection to people having developmental issues or illnesses connected to vaccines. Um, you name it. I mean, some people laugh. I mean, some people laugh and say, so essentially it's like, oh, it's like revelations. And I'm not one to get biblical, but some people are suggesting that. Best case scenario, we develop vaccines that are positive vaccines or preventative vaccines for cancer, right? Or on the road to, preventative vaccines for, sexually transmitted diseases or AIDS. We see that we are able to develop a new renewable sense of energy that's possible, that's more than just solar or something that's going to be even more powerful and something that's going to be more capable of us using it. We see new branches of government develop. We see there's new political parties that might be born as a result of this. We may see that certain government structures or international structures choose to work together in order to perhaps, stand up for other countries who are not capable of being able to fend for themselves. We may see that there's a major shift in the working structure in our country and maybe in other countries, but in our country where we're starting to kind of realize that we need to focus more on the mental health of our employees. We need to focus more on the physical health and making sure they have benefits and making sure that women have, the opportunity to have maternity leave and that we're really investing in the people of our country and getting back to the roots and also focusing more on welcoming people into this country rather than driving them away, because that's only going to continue to build the country up, right? So I see both sides. I'm optimistic. I hold space certainly for whatever is going to help facilitate getting to where we need to go. And I think it might be, unfortunately, a little bit of both. Did I lose you? You still there?
No, I accidentally unmuted myself. I totally agree. I think you're 100% right. I think that we are living in a moment of extremes, and the planets are really highlighting that with Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn coming into alignment the way they are in the sign of Capricorn next year. And where we end up falling isn't in someone else's hands, it's really in our own hands. So, you were the first person to say that it's up to us. We have the capacity to transcend our astrology. And when I first heard that, it rang like truth throughout my whole body. And you've also said that the planets don't compel, they impel, meaning they influence, but they do not control. So I am so grateful that you were here with us tonight to shed some light on what we might see in 2020 and how the planetary influences invite us to dance a little bit more with light, love, collaboration, despite of some of the polarization that we're being fed through mass media. So thank you, Candace. For those of you who'd like to book a reading with Candace, you can find her at beyondtheveiltarot.com. You can see her website here. Just click on over to sessions to learn what kind of session she has. Click on over to booking to book a session. She not only does astrology, but she's also a phenomenal clairvoyant. She is a medium. She can talk to those who have left their physical form and are on the other side. She is also an amazing clairvoyant. And so you can get all of those in a single session as soon as January, just a couple weeks away, guys, by clicking over here to booking and setting that up. Candace, thanks again. It was a pleasure to have you tonight.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Please share this video. Bye for now.